Welcome to Maya. We'll have a quick look around our screen to start off so we can understand and familiarize ourselves with the UI. At the top, you'll see a series of menus. Here you can essentially access everything inside of Maya. You can change these menus out to be more specific to what you're doing by having a look at this little drop-down menu here. We can change our menu set from modeling to rigging, animation, FX, rendering, and you can even make your own custom ones. Underneath that, you've got some tools. These are really generic, commonly used ones like your undos, your saves, as well as some selection tools and then some render stuff. Just underneath that, we have our shelf, which actually contains things that could be found inside our menus, although they're a lot easier to access and act more like shortcuts. You can see there's little tabs here with specific genres of tools. So we've got things like polymodeling, sculpting, or animation, or rendering. You can make, of course, your own custom ones, but these are great if you're just working along. You can also sort of add to them, so you can add your commonly used modeling tools and shortcuts here if there's extras that you don't see. Moving down again, starting on the left, we do have some little shortcuts here to selection and translate tools. I recommend you learn the shortcuts for these, which I'll go over shortly. We then have some viewport options. This is how we can easily split our viewport in the middle here into multiples, or we can even customize them. We can make our own layouts. It is a nice way to switch. There again is shortcuts for this. We have a little tab to open and close the outliner, which is what we see here. The outliner is just going to be a list of whatever is in the scene. So it's a great way to find what you've got in the scene without actually seeing it in the viewport itself. There is a little search function here as well. Control F is a shortcut to bring that in. This is great when you're starting. If you're unsure where a tool is, you know what the name is, you can click on here and just search for what you want to find. Moving across, we did mention it, but this is our viewport. This giant gray section in the middle is obviously one of our most important parts. This is where everything happens inside of Maya. We can move around in here. We'll go over how to do that shortly. But for now, let's just check out the fact that it has its own little toolbar at the top as well. This is going to be specific to this viewport. And you'll notice if we just go to one of our split versions, they each have the exact same toolbar. So it's good to know because it means if you're looking through a different camera, you may have settings here that have changed between each one. Excellent. Moving across to the right now, we'll start right at the top again, just to cover everything. We have a little workspace section. This again is just a way we can customize what our screen looks like with the UI. I do recommend when you start to just stay on general as you'll kind of get to know what everything is. These ones can be switched to if you know what you're doing, right? So you can see here, this expert one gets rid of a lot of what we have on the screen. That's again, because there's lots of shortcuts in Maya. You can get very good at it. You can access everything from just the viewport if you know the right keys. Below it, you have some icons to switch between these menus below. Whatever you find easier to work with, you might want to learn these icons themselves, or the main three things you're going to switch between are these tabs on the right. So let's have a look at what these are. Just to make it easy to understand what we're seeing here, I'm going to quickly just spawn an object and we'll see this now populates. So starting from this top tab, we have the channel box / layer editor, and that's the 3 stack of paper icon. This is a simple version of essentially showing us what our object is that we have selected in the scene, anything to do with it. So you can see here it's got our translates, our transforms. So we've got translate, rotate, and scale and visibility. These things can be keyframed here. We can also actually put values in here to move things around on the screen. You can also see inputs, which is essentially anything that's happened to the object. Down here, you'll also see some settings if you have an import that has the ability for settings. Just below that is the layer editor. So it's the second half of it. And this one by default is the display layer editor. This is going to be things in your scene. So you can kind of put things together in a group or a layer, which means you can turn them off or make them a reference. There's also animation layers here as well if you get into animation at some point. Moving down, we have the attribute editor. This is essentially just a more detailed version of the channel box. This one has its own tabs inside it, which is everything to do with our object that we have selected in the scene. So lots of very fine control stuff, but you'll find even if you go to the start tab, we've got the same things. Like we have our transforms here at the top. So breaks down everything into very specific details. You can even find your materials in here. Below that is our modeling toolkit, which we'll jump into very shortly. This is just a great one to have open when you are modeling, as it's got some really nice tools, easily accessible, as well as just some nice visual indicators of how much objects you have selected, or even when you get into components, you've also got your symmetry options and all that kind of good stuff there. Finally, just down the bottom here, we have our timeline. This is used for animation. As you can see, I can scrub through here. If you have animation, you'll see things progress in the timeline. And the last thing that you really need to know about, just in general, is just this little command line down the bottom. The reason I bring this one up as something to look at is it's kind of good to see if you ever do something like here. I just do a Control D to duplicate. I've got a result and it tells me what's happening on the screen. This is great just to keep an eye on if something happens. You'll see errors down here as well if something goes wrong. Let's now get into the basics of modeling inside of Maya. First thing we actually need to know is how to move the camera around in the viewport so we can move throughout our 3D scene. Just to give a point of reference, I'm going to spawn a primitive shape in the center here. To do that, we're going to head up to the poly modeling shelf, and I'm going to click one of these ones at the start. I'm going to use a cube. All our camera controls inside of Maya are using the Alt key. So you hold down Alt and then the rest is on your mouse. So everything is Alt. I'm going to hold down Alt and I'm going to start with left click. So if I left click and drag, I'm now in rotation mode, right? I'm rotating my camera and it's an orbital rotation. It moves around my object. Wherever I rotate, I can go all the way around, back, forth, diagonal, wherever I want to go. Next up, still holding Alt, is middle mouse. So the scroll wheel, you push it in and you drag on the screen. This is our pan. So we can pan around left and right, and then I can rotate. So you can see I can start to combo these to move around the world quite easily. Lastly is our zoom, still holding Alt again. If we right mouse and drag, we are moving in and out. So we're zooming in and out. You can either go left and right, or you can go up and down, whatever works for you. There is an alternative to this. As you'll see, this is quite a smooth zoom, right? And that's great when you're trying to get things on your screen exactly the right size. I find a lot of the time I will just use my scroll wheel. So as you can see, if I just scroll in and out, I get the same thing. It's a little bit chunkier because of how scroll wheels work, but it works the same. And it just means most of the time you can zoom in and out really quickly with the scroll. If you need to get a more refined result, that's when you hold right mouse and holding Alt. There is one more important shortcut with camera movement, and it's a great one for when you accidentally get lost. So if you've been messing around with your camera and you're starting to use all the controls and getting used to them, you might find yourself out in the abyss. F is your friend. F is focus. If I hit F, it's going to focus on whatever I have selected. Now this is not just for when you get lost, it's also great for when you're modeling or detailing an area. You can click on different objects and then focus on them. So if I just had another object, you can see here, I move over here, click on this one, I now get to focus on that one instead. Really handy when you're starting to feel your camera feel a bit clunky, because it can do. Just click on whatever you want to look at, hit F, and you should be in business. Your rotate will work a lot better as well. The next thing we'll need to learn is how to actually move these objects around in our scene. So we have all these primitive shapes, but how do we scale them, translate them, rotate them? It's going to be a key part of our modeling, as when we get into our components as well, we want to be able to move, rotate, and scale them also. Let's stay with our cube here. I'm going to click on it to select it. You'll notice it's this bright green. That means we're in this object mode, so we're dealing with the whole shape, and let's stay that way for now. Just to visualize a few things, I'm going to turn my tab on the right here to Channel Box Layer Editor. This is nice because I can see the translate values, the transform values. So we've got translate, rotate, and scale. You'll notice when I start to move this stuff around, these numbers will change. Let's start by going through the shortcuts. These shortcuts are really, really good ones to learn because they're going to be used a hell of a lot. So even so they only save you a little bit of time, that adds up to hours and hours and hours over your lifetime in Maya. All the shortcuts we're going to need are at the top of our keyboard, Q, W, E, R. So the first letters on our keyboard. Q at the start is, you'll notice them over here on the left, our just basic selection. So this actually doesn't move our object at all. The real benefit of this one is you'll notice it gets rid of the gizmo. Where this comes in handy, just to show you, is if you had multiple objects and they were moved, Sometimes this gizmo gets in the way. So I want to select this one in the middle and I'm trying to click and I keep grabbing the arrow, which is pretty annoying. If I go to Q, select mode, I can grab these really easily. So that's where it comes up. You'll be surprised how often that happens as well though. Moving along though, let's get into the actual transforms. W is our next one, and that is our move tool. So we'll see a gizmo here. There's a bunch of arrows and a few squares as well. Each arrow represents an axis in the world. You'll see this little cube in the top right. This is going to tell you where things are with a name. So you've got top, right, front, etc. But down the bottom left, really tiny, you'll see a little gizmo that also shows the axes and their names. So you've got Z, Y, and X, and those are representative to the axes of the 3D world. So Z is actually our forward and back. X, this red one here, so Z is blue. X, the red one, is left and right. And then lastly, green is our Y, that's our up and down. So as you'll just notice, if you click and drag on any of these arrows, you will move your object along that axis. What we can do as well is move two axes at the same time, and that's what these little squares are for. So if I grab this red square, essentially it's saying ignore the X axis, the red axis. So now I move on the Z and the Y. You'll notice in the top right of my screen, those numbers are moving. If I grab this green one, just moves along the floor instead. It's sort of a golden rule in 3D that you don't want to be moving on all three axes at a time most of the time, due to the fact that we're looking through a 2D screen, right? We can't really know where we're moving something if we're moving it on all three. You can move stuff with all three with the center square here, but as mentioned, it's hard to know where this is. So if I dropped it over here, is it on the ground still? Is it up in the air? I only know when I move my camera. And you can see it's in a kind of a weird spot. But if I was moving on two axes, I can 100% know that's still on the floor and it's over there. So it's a lot more accurate of a move. So usually one or two at a time is your way to go when moving objects. Let's move on. Next on our shortcut is E, and that is rotation. So a bit confusing because it's not R, but it is what it is in Maya. E is our rotate. You'll see it also has a gizmo. Pretty easy to understand this one. These axes, again, if we drag on the rings, they will rotate in that direction. So grabbing this one, the blue one, rotates the Z axis, as you can see in my channel box. Grabbing the red one, X, etc. This time, if you don't grab any of the axes, you'll be able to grab this centerpiece here, and that rotates on all axes. There is one big, light blue ring as well. This is camera-based rotation. So essentially this one is going to rotate directly on the axis pointing at your camera. So you can see it kind of looks a bit strange. It looks very flat, and that's because it's facing us, right? Cool. Last thing with the rotate, just while we're here, is holding J down on the keyboard before you grab one of these rings will introduce snapping. So if I hold J and start rotating, you can see it actually jumps 15-degree increments. This is really good for obviously doing 90 degrees or 45 degrees. Really sort of nice shortcut to know there. Perfect. Let's move on to our last transform shortcut, which is R. R is our scale tool, and this one again looks very similar to the move tool. If you grab one of these little sticks with the cubes on it, it's going to scale in that direction. So up here is our Y, X is our left and right, and we also have the squares, so we can do two at once. So you can kind of make a big flat wall if you ignore the X, or we can make a ground foundation with pulling the green one here because it's ignoring the Y. Lastly, we do usually want to grab the center one. So this is the only one we like to grab the center because scaling on our axes just means bigger. It gets bigger, it stays the uniform shape. We can increase the size of the whole shape without losing its proportions. Excellent. Next up, we want to learn about components. So components are essentially what a 3D object is made out of. We have the top level, the object itself, and we have faces, and we have edges, and then we have vertices. Without them, we won't be able to make very complex objects because we only have access to these, generic shapes. So let's look at how we can access them and then move them and change them to what we want. To get into our different components, I recommend jumping over to the modeling toolkit just so we can visualize them at the top. These buttons here will change the mode we're in. Again though, I really recommend you try to learn the shortcut here just because these are super key. You'll use them all the time and you'll save yourself hours in the future. To get into our components, we just hold right click over the object we have. So holding right click will open up what we call a whip menu or a radial menu inside of Maya. Now these are everywhere. Maya has a lot of them. They're always context sensitive. This is how you become very, very good at Maya and you can become very, very fast. What we see here at the top is the only stuff we need to look at. Let's ignore all this box below for now. What we'll see is different components. So we actually see object mode off to the top right here. We also have edge, vertex, vertex face, face, and then there's multi and UV. Now, most of the ones we're going to use are just object, edge, face, and vertex. So we can ignore the other ones for now. To switch them, you just, while holding right click still, hover over the one you want to choose. So if I want to go face mode, I just let go. Now what you see is I have switched over to face selection mode. Now this lets me access the faces. So when I hover over, you can actually see, I can click on each one of these faces, select it, and you'll notice the gizmo comes with it. So that means I'm in my scale tool R at the moment. I can scale just one face and already I'm making a unique shape. I'm customizing it on a component level. Let's switch to another one. So let's go hold right click. Now, one cool thing, just a little extra tip here with the whip menus, you don't actually need to even see where these are. So when you get good at this stuff and you start to learn, if I know edge is up here, instead of changing quickly, I'm just going to quickly just hold right click and swish upwards. And now I'm in edge mode. So it's really cool to kind of switch between them. You can see I can switch down to face again, up to edge, vertice, object, and I can switch really, really quickly once you get good at it. For now, let's just go slowly to edge, and you can see here I grab my edges, I can scale them, I can switch to W, move, I can move them around, I can even do rotates as well, and change this component. Lastly, let's look at vertice. These are our corners. So you can see I can grab each corner here and shift it around and move it how I want to, customize it. Different tools are going to need different types of selections. So some tools are going to work best with faces, some are going to work with edges, vertices, etc. You'll have to kind of decide what the best way to go about modeling something is and which selection you're going to need. Now, one thing we can probably understand straight away is that if we're trying to make complex shapes, we need components to work with. So at the moment, I have a limited amount of components, right? If I wanted a dip in the middle of this cube, I don't really have the ability to do that at the moment. And that's because I've only got, 6 faces, just like a regular cube. If I wanted extra lines and things, I might want to use a tool that I can add to afterwards, or just a little tip when you're getting started, you might want to think ahead. So just to show this real quick, before we jump into our modeling tools, just some basic ones. Whenever you create a primitive, so from the top section here again, let's create a cube again. If you hit T on your keyboard, you will get a little context menu. Now you see this a lot whenever you use any of these tools as well. They usually come with one, but sometimes it's hidden by default. So T will always bring that forward if you think there should be one. Now what's cool about this is, one, it lets me choose the actual starting shape. This is great if you're trying to be very measured. So these are technically centimeters by default. So this value here is 3 centimeters. You can, manually type in here as well. I could type 10, and then I know this height is 10 centimeters. Or as you saw, I can drag on the word itself here to kind of change these values. Now, that's important sometimes, but a lot of times you can just use, your scale tool and be a little more free flowing. If you're making just art stuff, we don't care too much about measurements. You might have more relative scale. What we care about here is the subdivisions. So these subdivisions, width, height, and depth, essentially let me add more components to my starting shape. So as mentioned, if I wanted to have that dip in my shape, 3 subdivisions gives me the ability now to grab this center face. And now I can go and push that down, and I've got a more complex shape that I can't get from a primitive. So that's where it really starts to, come forward, and you can see how to build this stuff up. To finish off now, let's just have a look at a few of the basic modeling tools. The ones I'm going to show here are some very core fundamental ones that, again, you will use a lot. There is a hell of a lot more than what I'm about to show you, but with the couple selection of tools, all from this toolkit here, you should be able to do quite a lot and have a bit of fun and get started. To start off with, probably the most important tool you ever need for modeling is the extrude tool. Now, this one works best in face mode, so hold right click, just like we learned, and grab into face, and now you can see I can move faces around. Now, what's good about the extrude tool is it creates new geometry. It creates new volume, essentially. I can use it by clicking on the extrude button over here in my toolkit, and you'll see it puts me into a slightly different mode. So it's given me a little context menu, and it's also changed my gizmo slightly. So this is something that you'll get used to eventually. You can kind of even switch out of here and then still just use your regular tools. But for now, let's explore what we've got here. With the gizmo, it's pretty simple. We can kind of use it the same way. It's kind of got inbuilt scale and move at the same time here. So it's a great way to make some quick changes if you need them. You also notice that some of these are actually changing the values here. So I'm just going to undo quickly just to kind of showcase more what these do. You've got thickness here and you've got local translate Z. Now what you'll find is they do a very similar thing a lot of the time. Where you'll see that difference is only really on corners. If I was to just show you really quick, if I did an extrude, you'll see thickness here keeps the shape itself, whereas local translate is going to sort of average out your shape as well. So usually you'll just drag on each one and see if it's the one you need at that point. But for now, most of the time they do a very similar thing. Next up, you have offset. So if I just increase that local translate again, we'll see offset is kind of like a scale. So as I drag this in, you can see I get a scale towards the center, or if I do a negative offset, we kind of scale outwards. Now, one thing you'll notice there when I drag on the word is it's a bit chunky. It's really jumpy and it goes in really large areas, which is hard to control. This is to do with the scale of my scene. It's actually very small at the moment. But if you're ever working with this kind of stuff, if you want to get more control, the idea in the shortcut here is to hold control. So if I hold down control on my keyboard and now drag on that word, you'll see it actually moves the decimal point and we get more control. You can do this further by holding control and shift, and it just adds that an extra decimal again, and you get really smooth control here. So if you're having trouble with jumpy stuff, that's how you get around it. Last one that's too relevant here is our divisions. So this value here, we can drag that up and it creates more subdivisions, which again is more components. It means we can model more complex shapes. The last one here, just to kind of show you, is the keep faces together. So this is only relevant if you extrude multiple faces. So if we have all three here and do an extrude, and we'll increase the thickness and we'll pull that out. Oh, I grabbed another one, that's okay. If we turn this on, well, by default it's on. It means if we do things like offset, they stay together, right? They're scaling towards each other. If we were to turn this off by just clicking on the on button, what we get here is the ability to kind of deal with them one at a time. You can see it's acting a little bit strange, but we can see that each one of these is its own independent extrude. So sometimes useful, whatever you kind of need for that situation. That's pretty much the extrude tool. There is other ways to do it. Just to kind of, before we move on, because it's one you use a lot, let's have a look at some quick shortcuts for it. So first shortcut is actually just Control E. That is just putting us into the extrude tool itself. So when I Control E, just like I've clicked it over here. One sort of quicker way to do it, and this is for more basic extrudes, is something called Smart Extrude. And the way you actually access that is just in either your Move tool or your Scale tool. So if I'm my Move tool and I just hold down Shift, as I'm holding over an arrow, you'll see the word extrude appears. And that means actually, while I'm in my Move tool, if I just hold Shift, I can extrude. So I can grab here, pull out, I can go, again, and you can see I can make more subdivisions. So very easy way to add dimension and volume to your shape. As mentioned, this works with the Scale tool as well. So this one's really great if we hold Shift for creating inset values. So if I pull in, essentially it's like an offset. And now I could switch over to my Move tool. And if I push this back, you can see it kind of pulls. But if I hold Shift and push it back, I get an extrude and I kind of put a hole in the shape here. Excellent. That is your most common one. 100% you will use that again and again as you kind of go through your modeling processes. Let's go to a few other ones real quick. I'm just going to grab another cube, just put it next to it, scale it up a little bit. Let's look now at the bevel tool. So the bevel tool here is just next to the extrude. You can use this one on edges. So if I grab one of these edges and click bevel, what I will get is a bevel. Essentially, it kind of splits an edge. That's how you can imagine it. So this fraction here, if I pull that, you can see it's again really jumpy. If I hold Control and Shift, I get that control. And I've got things like segments, which by default are going to round the edge here. You've also got depth, so you can kind of have like an opposite bevel. It's almost like an indent. You got different mitering settings. I wouldn't worry too much about these when you're getting started. These top 3 are going to be your main ones to use here. Now, this works great on one edge, or if we go back, we can actually grab multiple edges. I haven't covered this quite yet. We'll go over some more selection stuff just right at the end. If I hold down Shift, I can grab multiple components. This works with objects, faces, whatever we're working with. We can grab multiple by holding Shift. You can see if it's already selected, if we click on it, it takes away from the selection. So if I grab all of these and now do a bevel, you can see I get the ability to deal with them all at the same time and they work together. One other use for the bevel tool is if you have edges inside a mesh. So I've got an edge here that, it's not changing the shape or anything, but it's only one edge. So what if I want to grab that whole edge and split it into multiple? So I need more detail there. Let's show another little shortcut for selection. And that's if you've got an edge that runs around, it's something called an edge loop. And we can grab edge loops by just double clicking on them. So as long as I'm in edge mode and I'm in my select tool at the moment, Q, doesn't really matter what you're in. But if I double click on this, we now get the whole loop selected. So just grabbing one, you can see, just grabs that. If I hold Shift, it just goes one. But if I double click, it recognizes the loop and grabs it all. So now if I click bevel again, you can see what it actually did there is split it into 2. And I could split it into as many as I needed for the model I was creating. So very handy way to split edges like that as well. Just because I've just told you that, let's take a little quick segue for another selection. And that's if you want faces. So I'm going to decrease these. What if I wanted to grab this face loop instead? Now faces are a little bit different, right? Because they don't really have a forward and back. They have 4 sides. So how does a computer know which way to go if we want this loop? Because if I double click on it, you'll see it just grabs the whole shape. Not so useful. What if I want to run this around? All I need to tell the computer is which way to go. So the way to do that is grab the first one and then Shift, double click the next one in the loop. And that just goes, okay, that's the direction I need to go, and I'll go all the way around. So I can do that here again. Boom, grab that whole loop, and you can see it selected everything for me. Very, very handy. Awesome. Let's move on to another tool really quick. And that goes quite nicely into what I was just showing here. And that is the multi-cut tool. So the multi-cut tool, again, very, very useful one. Has a lot of settings actually here by default as well, which you can check out in the toolkit. But for the most part, you want to use it as an edge loop tool. As we just saw, edge loops are very important. They're great for selecting, splitting, creating more volume, whatever we kind of need. So how do we create them if we're not, extruding outwards? What if I want one in the center here? How do I get an extra loop? And the way we do that is the multi-cut tool and hold Control. As soon as you hold Control on the multi-cut tool, it turns it into an edge loop tool. And that means you can see this little gizmo sort of showcasing. It's like a preview of what I'm going to do. And it runs perpendicular to where my mouse is. So if you remember, perpendicular just means the opposite direction essentially. So this edge is running horizontal on my screen. So when I hold Control, the edge loop will get put sort of vertically on that object. If I was to run over this one, the vertical one, I now get this edge loop that runs around my whole model in a more horizontal way. Excellent. To place these in, you just left click. And as you can see, I've got an edge loop, which if I switched out of my multi-cut tool, you'll notice multi-cut tool is a little bit weird. It puts you into a mode, it stays selected. If you ever want to get out, you either click it again, or you can just hit Q or W or any other tool, and that'll switch you out. So now I've got an edge loop here, I can double click on it. It goes around, I can bevel it, whatever I need to do. One last little handy thing with the multi-cut tool is when you're holding Control, if you middle mouse click, so push in the scroll wheel, it centers it. So it snaps to 50%, halfway through the edges that it can grab. So it's gone from this one to this one and it's gone, okay, that's the center. This is very handy for if you need, specific amount of edges evenly distributed. So if I went here, here, and here, middle mouse clicks, I now have this face split into 4 equal faces essentially. Really, really cool one. Last couple tools before we wrap things up. and that is going to be our combine tool and our bridge tool. Now these work quite nicely together because essentially what these are for is if we have multiple objects and we want to attach them to each other, how can we do that? Now this is something that comes up a lot in modeling. If we want to, model some parts separately and then we want to combine them together and then model them as a more complex shape, we want to be able to, one, make them into one object, and then two, actually connect them up. So what I'm going to do here, I should probably show you that as well. Control D is our duplicate key. So it only works in object mode, and I've got my object selected here, and I hit Control D, and now I move it and it's a full separate object. Now what I want to do here is kind of connect these two faces together. So I want to grab this face and then I want to put it on this face here. But what you'll see is when I'm in face mode, that one grays out. It's not selected anymore. It won't connect. And the reason for that is it's dealing with it as a separate object. It's its own thing. It can't find that face over here because it doesn't know about it. So what we need to do is combine these objects. We can do that by drawing a box around both of them, another selection method, or we can just grab one and shift click the other one here. With both of them selected, one of them will look white borders and one of them will look green borders. It's just to do with which one was selected last. We want to click combine, which is in our modeling toolkit at the top. Click that, and these are now dealt with as one object. One little nitpick here is that you'll notice in the left in our outliner, it's sort of created a new one called PQ4, which is our new object, but it left behind some garbage. This is a concept I'll briefly cover quickly here, where everything you do in Maya gets remembered by the computer. This is good sometimes, and this is bad sometimes. It's bad if things are constantly remembering stuff and it starts to slow down the computer. It's good if you want to be able to go back and change stuff. If you're happy with what you want and you want to set it in, it's a good practice whenever you've done something like a combine to delete its history, to make it forget about the past. And the way we do that is actually this little guy here, a little icon called delete history, delete by type history. It's a little clock and some lines underneath. If I click that, you'll notice everything disappears here. We no longer remember the past, and it will run a lot nicer in the future, and it won't affect any of its old actions or operations. Excellent. So now we want to bridge these together. These are one object. So in object mode, you can see I can move them around. They go together. I want to be able to grab this face and connect it to this face. I do that by selecting both of them and clicking bridge. This bridge is kind of what you'd expect. It bridges faces together. So I can add divisions here. You can even do funny things like twists as well, which be careful of because they will look kind of funky by default. And there's a bunch of other stuff here where you can even change this to blend, and you can get like a soft blend of the faces and the curve here. Really kind of cool. Be aware this can be done with faces, but it's usually done with edges a lot of the time. So if I was just to grab these faces and delete them, we'll sort of see inside the cubes, which is a little bit scary. But this means now I can do it on like a face level, an edge level, and create a face here. So clicking bridge with two edges here creates our one face connection, which is really nice. Awesome. That's pretty much it for our modeling tools. With that sort of basic set of core fundamental ones, you should be able to model some fairly complex stuff right off the bat. It'll give you enough to create volume with the extrude tool, create new edges with your bevel tool, remembering to start with an object by hitting T and thinking ahead in case you need extra edges. You will be able to create some pretty nice stuff. So see how you go.